Homework part 2, super mega bonus credit. Stop hard, oh, I'm sorry, bonus credit first. Make that button work. So, we need a way to add things. How do we add things? Where are our things in the first place? They're here in state things, right? App. In the app component, this.state.things. So to add a thing would be to add something to app.state.things. So let's make it do that. A state only exists on that component. It maintains its own internal state. Anytime we need information to pass between components, we use props, right? So state is internal to that component. Props are how we pass information from one component to another. So ThingList and Thing know about our things collection because it's already being passed in as a prop, right? Right down here. Things, props look just like attributes on HTML. So we need something to handle the clicking of that button. But what that thing ultimately needs to do is actually change this object. So it's going to happen at the app level because we can't change props. So if you pass props to a component, those are read-only as far as that component is concerned. We won't be able to change app's state from thing or from add thing button. We have to do it up here. So let's make a function that's going to do it up here, and then let's worry about how to call it. So I'm going to call it add thing. Now we've learned a couple of ways to deal with the fact that if this is an event handler, this will not be bound the way we want it. Let's learn another way to do that. It's the same trick that lets us initialize state like this outside of the constructor. And do keep in mind that that does not work everywhere. That is relying on Babel for now because that's not yet part of ECMAScript. It's not supported directly in browsers. And it may not be even supported in every Babel configuration. It does not work on CodePen, for example. But we can use that same concept of a property initializer to create our methods by throwing in an equal sign and an arrow. So now it's an arrow function, and arrow functions bind this the way we like. And we can just set this like we would any other property, and it'll set it directly on the component itself. So then we don't have to worry about binding this manually where it's called or inside the constructor or anywhere else. It'll just do it. So we want add thing to add something to this.state.things. We know we don't update state directly, right? We use set state to do it. So at some point we're going to say this.setState something. But first we need to figure out what that new state is going to be, what the new value of things is going to be. It's going to be the same object with an additional key. So first of all, let's get a copy of the current value of state.things so that we can modify it without modifying it directly. So to do that, I'm going to create a local variable called things, const things, equals, and I want a copy of this.state.things. So this.state.things, we need a copy of that though, because we learned that objects are passed around by reference, not value. So it will be the exact same object if I just do it like this. I need a copy of it. Yesterday we learned how to make a copy of an array using an operator that's new in ES6. We're going to do the same thing with this object. Put the curly braces there and put an ellipsis inside, and that copies every property from this.state.things into a new object that we're going to save as the constant things. Now, We just learned this yesterday, actually. When you do this with an object, not an array, that's actually not part of ES6. It's not part of the standard. That is just a feature of Babel. But it's used a lot, especially in React, because everyone who uses React uses Babel pretty much. So we're going to go ahead and use it, but know that this doesn't work directly in a browser either. You have to have some sort of preprocessor to do this. But we're already using JSX, so that's already not an option. So now we have a copy of things out of state that we're going to manipulate. And what we need to do is just add a new thing. So we can make a new thing. Const thing equals some new object. It's going to have an ID. It's going to need a name. For right now, we can just start the name as blank. What should the ID be? It's going to be like thing dash something, right? Just incrementing the integers is boring. I'm going to instead put a timestamp in there. And there's a remote chance, I suppose, that two people using the same, well, not really. Not really if it's not being synced with the database. There's pretty much no risk that you're going to end up with a duplicate this way. So let's just do it that way. So I'm going to use a template string and say thing hyphen, and then we'll interpolate so I can put an expression in here. So I showed you yesterday, new date. You can also, as of ES6, say date.now. That'll get you a Unix epoch representation of time, the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. And just leave the name blank. So then, to add it to this things object, what would I do? How would I add that thing to the things object? It's not an array. I can't push. Use brackets. So things, bracket, what? What are our keys? They're the IDs, right? This key matches this ID. So, what ID is it? Thing.id. So just set that equal to thing, and it's added to our local variable. Now it's not in state yet. To do that, we need to call this.setState. And what we want to do is say things colon things. But we learned that if the variable name happens to match the key, you can use this shorthand and just say set state things. So what's the button going to do? Nothing, because we haven't actually put up the event handler, right? But we've made the darn function. So hey, we can test the function. In React, let's look for our our app. So now app is $R. So if I call $R dot add thing, hey, there's one at the bottom. It did it, for what it's worth. All right, let's set up the event handler. So add thing button is the thing that's going to fire the event, right? And add thing is the function it's going to call. So add thing button needs to know about that. So just as we pass down this.state.things as a prop, we could pass the actual method as a prop. Functions are objects, so that's totally legal. We've passed them as callbacks before, right? We've totally passed functions as arguments to other functions, and we can pass them as props to other components. So we could give add thing button a prop called add thing. That will equal, don't forget your curly braces, this dot add thing. No parens, we're not invoking it here. We're passing it as a prop, the function itself. You dig? So now an add thing button, we need to make use of that. So we can put props in here and say props.addThing. We learned a trick yesterday to get the individual properties out of an argument. So this will make a local variable called addThing, so I don't have to say props.addThing. And that prop is the same function. So I could say button class name equals addThing button on click. Camel case, remember, that matters in JSX. addThing. Now that'll pass an event in, but we don't have a default action that we need to prevent, so we don't really need that event for anything, so we're not going to bother with it. But it's there. We don't have to bind this because it's already bound correctly because of the property initializer that we used in app. So let's see. Clicky, clicky. Hey, we're adding blank things. That feels important. So personally, I kind of like the idea of having this generating a blank thing in a separate function. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to call it thing. You could call it blank thing or something like that, whatever. I'm just going to use these property initializers from now on. Doesn't actually matter here. Yeah, since it doesn't matter, I guess I won't do it. We don't need to worry about what this is. And all that's going to do is return this blank thing. So now const thing equals this dot thing. Parens. I just like that better. If we ever needed to change the default values for a blank thing, we know right where to go to do that. Make sure it still works. Seems to. Let's double check our state. Look in app state. And sure enough, we have these with the IDs that are timestamps and blank names. So they're not just showing up in the DOM, they're actually being saved in our state.